And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. I'm your host, Wes Tankersley. If you can do me a favor right now, if you're watching this live, please do a watch party. If you're listening to it on the podcast, please do a like, share, and review. Help me to grow the show and reach more people. This is episode number 79. My guest is Brandon Mouw. Brandon was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic at the age of 3. He didn't let that hold him back. He went on to become a teacher, then a lawyer, and this is kind of where the story begins. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, hey, it's good to have you on. You've got this story that is just amazing, and I think that everyone should hear it. Can you give us a little background on yourself?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Southern California on a chicken ranch. And as you said, diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic at the age of 3. I went on after the family sold the business to become a high school teacher, and then 3 years later went to law school. And that's kind of where my diabetes turned into this crazy monster of a thing, and technically I shouldn't be alive right now.
Well, before we get into that part, because that's a big story that I want to discuss, let's talk a little bit about who you were before this whole thing went happen. So you went to high school and then you decided to become a history teacher. You also did some theology as well. You have 2 degrees in that before the law school. Can you talk a little bit why you chose to be in education and those 2 as your majors?
Yeah, so after my the whole point of me growing up and working on our chicken farm, and we would raise chickens from day one when they would hatch until they could lay eggs, and then we would collect eggs, wash them, candle them, package them, and then sell them. And so that was my life, and I was supposed to take over the business later in life. But the issue was that a bird disease came through, and the government came in and killed all of our chickens. They gassed them because they didn't want the disease to continue to spread, and it put us out of business overnight. And so we ended up having to sell the property. And then I was left with trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do with my life after that. And so it was kind of one of those go and find yourself situations, and I ended up going to Calvary Chapel Bible College here in Southern California to learn about theology and kind of give myself just a break to figure out what to do. And then from there, I thought I really enjoyed history, and I enjoyed the aspect of teaching it in my own unique way. And so I went on to teaching, and I enjoyed it and I was very happy with it, except it wasn't enough. I didn't feel challenged. Dealing with the administration was very difficult for me, coming from such an independent background to have to deal with so much being told what to do, and then everything is last minute, and not being allowed to really run a classroom like I wanted to. And so I thought I got to do something different. And I thought I'd shoot for the stars, and I applied to law school, and that's kind of like the progression of what ended up happening. I never thought I would end up going to school in the first place, but I had to do something after the business was sold. So it's kind of like just rolling with the punches and figuring it out as I went.
It's amazing because I was a teacher, and listening to that story about all the stuff that you went through being a history teacher and everything like that, it's the same feelings I had. I did it for 4 years, but there was so much stuff that, they didn't allow you to teach kids anymore. So I can completely understand that. So the whole time that you went through raising the chickens and getting to high school and things like that, you're a type 1 diabetic. Can you tell people the difference between type 1 and type 2? Because I don't know that a lot of people know. They just know that someone's diabetic, right?
Right. So there are 2 classifications of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 means that your pancreas pancreas is what controls your body. It creates insulin, it breaks down your food, it delivers energy throughout your body. It adds to cell regeneration. It basically allows you to function as a live human being. And when your pancreas fails, you are then a type 1 diabetic. Your body doesn't have insulin, and you have to supplement that by taking insulin injections because your body cannot produce it. And you need those insulin injections to live, and they have to be precise and exact, or it will cause you to have high or low blood sugars and cause you pain and suffering if you don't have well controlled diabetes. And then you have type 2 diabetes, which makes up, I think it's like 60 million. I'm sorry, it makes up about 25 to 30 million people here in the United States are type 2 diabetics, which means that your pancreas doesn't make enough insulin. It makes insulin, but just not enough for what your body needs. And so you have to supplement that by taking mostly oral medication to boost your pancreas to make more insulin, or you can change your diet and lifestyle so that you're eating low glycemic foods, and by exercising you can burn the extra food that is in your body, and you don't have to take the medication. So in a lot of cases, type 2 diabetes is reversible, where you can get rid of it, and type 1 is something that is incurable, and you will have it for the rest of your life.
And so you grew up, from a 3-year-old having to give yourself insulin, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so how did that affect the things that you did? Were you able to play like sports and participate in other activities that other kids were able to, or did that make it a little bit tough?
Yeah, I was able to live a completely normal life. I had to test my blood about 6 times a day. And when I was diagnosed in 1987, it was far different than it was today. The lancets to test your fingers, especially when you're really young with such small fingers, the lancet needle was so thick that my fingers would just bleed for days. And so every finger I would have like Band-Aids over to prevent the bleeding. And that was just my normal life until they made the lancets thinner and technology got better. But outside of that, I was able to play sports, and my parents knew that the risk of the high and low blood sugars, because the more you exercise, the more energy you exert, your body burns through insulin quicker. And so you tend to have the low blood sugar, and to fix the low blood sugar, you need to eat sugar. And so what would happen is I would play sports, and my dad would either coach or at least be there, or one of my family members would. And every break I would get, every time I would go into the sideline, there would be orange juice or juice for me to drink. Oranges or juice for me to drink, because if I wasn't consuming that while I was playing sports, I would have the low blood sugar. And for the most part, no one would know I was a diabetic. It wasn't something you wore on your sleeve. You didn't want people to know. It was kind of looked down upon when I was growing up, but it didn't stop me. I had the support of my parents, and they made sure that I was able to do everything that was necessary. And I'll bring this up as well. Like in school, when other students were having birthday parties, they would bring cupcakes to school. My mom was aware, and then she would make sure that I had something that was appropriate for a diabetic to eat at the time there for me, so that I didn't feel like I was left out. So I don't feel like my childhood was different. I just embraced the diabetes and just the things that I needed to do to manage it, and I had a great childhood.
So where did it go from there? Because we talked about, the childhood was pretty easy, but then you got into law school and something happened. Where did it go from there? Because normally you can just continue to supplement your insulin, you're good to go, but you had something else happen. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so a diabetic, you can be a well-controlled diabetic and live a completely normal life. It's an autoimmune disease, and there are secondary things that happen along the way, but you can live a completely normal life, and that's what I was doing. Everything was great. I was a well-controlled diabetic, feeling good, living my best life, and here I am in high school, and all of a sudden I feel this pain on my left side. And I will say that as a diabetic, you kind of get used to, or you have a higher tolerance to pain, because every time your blood sugar goes high or goes low, you feel really terrible. And when your blood sugar is high, this is what I like to compare it to. It feels like there's mud running through your veins, and so you're just really bogged down mentally. You don't have clarity. Um, you just don't feel well. And so once you get the blood sugar under control, then your body has to recover and feel better. And then when your blood sugar is low, it's like you were like really, really, really drunk. And then all of a sudden you come back, and then your body has to recover from that hangover of a low blood sugar. And so it kind of you kind of become a little more tolerant to pain that way. And so I just thought, I hurt myself working out, or I had just gone on a hike. I was like, I must have done something goofy, pulled a muscle. But a couple days later, the pain was so bad that I went to the hospital. And it was the first time I had been to the hospital since I was diagnosed as a diabetic at the age of 3. I had never broken a bone. I was never sick enough to go to the hospital, nothing. And I was there knowing something was bad going on within me. It felt like an elephant was stepping on my side. And it turned out that I had 2 kidney stones the size of my thumbnail in my left kidney, and one had dislodged from wherever it was developing and was preventing the urine from coming out of my kidney going into my bladder. And because I waited almost a week before going in, I was also septic, and my kidney was extremely enlarged. And so that's kind of the turning point of my diabetes, is the kidney issue, because they were never able to resolve or fix that kidney. They were able to remove the kidney stones, but it left too much scar tissue, and the kidney scarred up. And they went in and tried to fix it. And then a few months later, they cut out about 1/4 of the kidney and reattached it. And then a year later, it was determined that it was completely dead, and they needed to remove it. And so I had the kidney removed, and kind of by messing with the kidney for so long, my body no longer could process insulin correctly. I developed antibodies and insulin antibodies, and so it would fight the insulin, and then when it decided to not fight the insulin, it would stop, and then all the insulin would be used at once, as opposed to it being used over an 18-hour period, and it would cause the really bad hypoglycemic episodes. And then in addition, it affected my stomach and the way it digested food, so that my stomach didn't digest food all the way down to the point where it could be broken down into energy. And so there were 2 different things I was trying to battle at the same time, which then caused me to no longer be a well-controlled diabetic. And then I became what is known as a brittle diabetic. And that means that no matter what you do, no matter if you're eating 10,000 calories a day, or you're eating absolutely nothing, your blood sugar will decide to go extremely high or extremely low, and insulin does not work accordingly. And that's what I ended up becoming after the kidney stone issue.
So does brittle diabetic, what does that mean, other than that has nothing to do with like your bone structure, right? Like you don't become more susceptible to like breaking bones and things like that.
Correct. The brittleness. So it's a very rare like diagnosis for a diabetic, and it simply means that your diabetes is so brittle that the smallest thing will cause it to just go off into dangerous, deadly levels. So mine would go low. That was the issue with me, and it would go so low that I would pass out. I was found dead twice. I was brought back to life, and the brittle aspect of it just simply means that you can't control it, and it's so crazy that you'll do the same thing every single day with a completely different outcome. Like it makes no sense, and so it's very. The brittleness aspect makes it so that you can't control it to a point where at any time there's that breaking point of it going high or low. I hope that makes more sense.
No, it makes complete sense. I mean, if you just look at it in the sense of that there is every little thing can mess whatever it is, high or low, up. So, yeah, that makes sense to me. So, what is the answer to this? Because you were 3 years into law school, or you were clerking, you'd already finished, and then this happens. What is their suggestion to you?
Yeah, so the suggestion, so when you're in that situation of such low blood sugars, and you legitimately cannot function, and you're constantly recovering from those low blood sugar hangovers, you can't live a normal life. You try, but it starts taking a toll on you because your body is literally shutting down every single time, and it has to restart. And so the idea was to first try to prevent the low blood sugars from happening at all. And that was by getting on as minimum or as minimal amount of insulin as possible, and eating as much food as I could to try to keep that blood sugar up high. And by doing that for long enough, the hope was that my body would reset. But the issue was, because of the antibodies, no matter how much insulin I took, no matter how little insulin I took, the antibodies would hold on to the insulin, and my blood sugar would go up, but then it would release all the insulin at once, and then my body would crash. And so there really was no rhyme or reason as to trying to keep my blood sugar up, because we couldn't do anything about the antibodies that were attacking the insulin. And so then it became a matter of trying to figure out how to control the low blood sugars through different types of insulins, different dosing, and then adding different eating regimens into it. And it ultimately came down to me drinking Gatorade and juice constantly, just sipping on it all day long to try to elevate that blood sugar. And that was the only thing keeping me alive. And after trying every treatment that there possibly is that anyone could think of, I went to health gurus, I went to Western medicine healers, any doctor you can think of, I went to. It was finally determined that the only way to do it, this was the last case scenario, was a pancreas only transplant. And they're very rare, and they're very expensive, because under the Affordable Care Act, it's an optional coverage. And so insurance companies choose the option to not cover it. And it's $250,000 to have a pancreas only transplant. And so that's where it led. After all treatments and diagnosis, it led to we have no other option for you but to go to the last case scenario and hope it works. And so that's where I was kind of left.
And so with that, you ended up getting this transplant, but you had to find a creative way to make it happen. What did you do to get the funds to do this? Because it's not a cheap fix.
No, and especially when, here I'm fighting insurance, I'm suing everybody trying to get that covered, because insurance companies claim they cover all medically necessary things. And I finally got a ruling and a letter that stated, while we agree that your procedure is medically necessary, it is an optional coverage in the Affordable Care Act, and we choose not to cover it. Therefore, you are not approved for the surgery. And so that leaves me with having to cover all costs. And I don't come from wealth. I don't come from money. I had just graduated law school. I wasn't working at the time because I was too sick. I couldn't drive. And I didn't know where to start to raise the money. However, my roommate that was living with me at the time, to check on me, to make sure that I would be up in the morning, because if I wasn't, there was an emergency and a problem going on. She had done a lot of fundraisers online before to raise money for her to go and help build wells, and she was really involved with a lot of things where she would go and help other people and have to fundraise for that. And she basically told me, you need to crowd fundraise online. And my immediate response was, hell no, I'm not doing that, because to me it seemed weak. It seemed something that was out of character for me. No one knew I was a diabetic. No one knew I was having these problems. Yet I was fighting this battle all alone. And the only way to to actually get $250,000 because I couldn't take out a loan. My family didn't have anything to help, and the most we could probably raise if we sold everything would maybe be $20,000, which wouldn't help. And so it eventually came down to me having to be vulnerable and put my story online and to start sharing it with people and let them know the state that I was in, and making the ask of, hey, I need your help. This is why. Please help in any way you can. Share the story. And what the most amazing thing happened, and people started to give money, and they started to share my GoFundMe page, and people started donating, and I got messages, and friends, family, strangers started donating, and within 3 months I raised that $250,000 through some miracle, through whatever reason it was meant to be, because I know that most crowd fundraisers are not successful. It's very hard to raise money online, and that was what I thought would happen. That I would put it on there, and it would go nowhere. That's what I was told what would happen. I was also told by the hospital that try to raise the money, see what happens, and get back to us when you have it, as kind of like a dismissive, like like you're not gonna be able to do it because they've never seen it done before. And when I called them and said I have the funds, they said, you're the first person to have ever legitimately fundraised the $250,000 for the transplant. And so as soon as I gave them that money, I was listed for the transplant.
And so how long did it take to get that transplant? I mean, that's amazing that you were able to get the funds in 3 months. It's just great that people were willing to help out. But then you have this process of you're on the list and you got to wait. What was the wait time for getting that transplant?
Yeah, so the wait time for a pancreas only transplant, because it's very rare. There are a lot of extra pancreases that go on because they don't transplant them that often. So the wait time is the day you're listed up to 5 years. And so you don't know. It's all based on the blood type match and your HLA, which is aspects of your blood that are put in with a deceased donor's blood together to see how the blood reacts, to see if you can be a match or not. And my wait time ended up being 2 months. And so 2 months after I was listed, I got a phone call the day after Christmas, and they said, "Are you ready for a transplant? I mean, are you ready for a new pancreas?" And I was like shocked at how quick I got that phone call, because I was thinking I was going to have to wait years, because the average person waiting for a kidney has a 10-year wait list while they're on dialysis. And so I just assumed it was going to take a long time. And so I just was in a mode of survival. Just don't die until I can get this transplant. And I got the call the day after Christmas in 2018, and I went in, and within 20 minutes I was under anesthesia having that transplant done.
That's crazy. That's amazing that it was that quick, What happens after you get this transplant? I mean, are you no longer insulin dependent? Do you have to still test yourself and give yourself insulin every single day, or a couple times a day, or are you just, it's one of those things where your just body knows how to process it?
So one of the where the donated pancreas now take over the inside of my body. And so I no longer am an insulin dependent diabetic. I am technically no longer a diabetic. It's not a cure, because at any time this transplant can fail. It is a pause in my diabetes. If something goes wrong, I go right back to the situation where I was in, which would likely be death, because I have been through, my body has been through so much, it really can't take it. And so I now no longer have to take insulin, but and my blood sugars are no longer so low where I am literally on the brink of death every single day. But now I exchanged insulin for having to take immunosuppressant medication, which brings my immune system down to not fight the organ, and it also makes me immunocompromised, and the medication has a lot of side effects. But regardless of all of that, um, this process was definitely worth it, and it really showed me that I'm alive for a reason. Someone had to die for me to live, and I am forever grateful for that. Being an organ donor is probably one of the most brilliant and selfless things that you can do as a human being, because you're saving other people's lives, and I get to live on because of someone else's sacrifice. In addition to lots of people giving and investing in me, and so now since I am no longer insulin dependent, I feel great. I like you wake up feeling like Superman because your body is functioning correctly for the first time in so many years, and it allows me now to literally live life, as opposed to just um, letting life dominate me based on side effects and things like that. Now I get to decide what I want to do with my life, and I get to decide what my health looks like, and I get to decide how my life is lived.
So when you mentioned that it was a pancreas only is very rare, what are they exchanging when they normally, is it kidneys too with the pancreas when they do that donation or that surgery, or what is it normally?
Yeah, so because it's not covered by almost every insurance company, they don't do it because people just flat out can't afford it. They can't raise the funds for it. Number one, and number two, pancreas transplant is covered if it's done at the same time as another organ or after another organ transplant. And so generally, a person who's a diabetic, they go into kidney failure at some point because the kidneys get attacked first, and when they get on the transplant list, they are able to give them the pancreas and the kidney at the same time, and that's covered by insurance. Or if you needed a liver and a pancreas, that's covered by insurance. And so usually it's covered if it's done in tandem, but it's still very rare. A pancreas only transplant, they do less than 100 of them per year in the United States, and only a few hospitals actually do them because they don't have the highest success rate of all the organs.
I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but it just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if you need something, you need something. It shouldn't have to be two things when one thing is wrong. It just doesn't make sense.
You're right, and that was, and I had to learn that the hard way. And they said, well, can't we just wait till your other kidney fails? And I was like, no, my other kidney is great. Like, why are we gonna wait till that thing fails? I can't live my life in this state of not functioning and not living. And so 3 years later, kind of after going through all that, I was able to get that transplant. And the nice thing about it is I found a hospital, Mayo Clinic in Arizona. They understood the situation that I was going through, and they said, no, like you need that pancreas now. And it has to be done because that's what's going to save your life. And but yeah, so it's really rare because of those things, because um, hospitals are private and they survive off statistics, and they need good statistics, and they don't want you to be a failure. And they don't want to, if you're a high risk patient, they don't want to give you an organ donate or an organ surgery or an organ transplant that's going to fail or have the possibility of failing. And so it's like this very delicate balancing act that you have to play with the health system, because if you're just unhealthy, they don't care, because you're not going to be a good statistic for them, and then they can't claim we have a whatever percentage success rate because you're one of the failures, and so you kind of come down to whether you can be a success or not, and it's really sad that that's what it's based off of.
Well, it's crazy. You got your pancreas transplant, and now you're kind of moving on. Where does this take you? I've seen you've been guests on lots of podcasts. You're doing a little bit of speaking. What is the next steps for you as you move on with this new lease on life?
I'm at a point now where I am open to do things. But what I found out going through the process was that there was not a lot of information about people who have been through what I have been through. The hypoglycemic unawareness is very common within diabetes, but people aren't openly talking about it. And since I had to become so public with my information on social media, it brought a lot of attention from other people who are diabetics or who have the hypoglycemia unawareness and are going through similar things as me, and it kind of opened up a new opportunity for me to share my journey, to allow it to be a motivational aspect, and to get me into speaking and sharing my story, and to let people know that, hey, I came out of the impossible. I was told that what I went through was impossible. I was told, death was imminent. I had technically died twice, and now I truly, I feel good, and I am alive. And so that kind of has put me on this different path of raising awareness, speaking, sharing my story, and just letting people know that they're not alone in their suffering, that it's okay to make that ask if you need help, and it's okay to be vulnerable. And in addition, I am also a consultant, and outside of doing those things, I just enjoy life. I golf, I surf, I exercise, I do whatever is needed to bring joy to my life, because at any time it can be taken away. And that's kind of like my mentality right now. That'll probably change when I find a new passion project or something like that, but that's where I'm at right now.
Well, the great thing is now you have that opportunity, so you're able to continue to follow those dreams no matter what they be. So if someone was wanting to have you as a speaking engagement, or if you have speaking engagements coming up, or they want to find you, where can they find you?
Find me on brandonmouw.com. That's spelled M with a Mary, like M for Mary, OUW, brandonmouw.com. It's a simple website. All my information is on there. I have a book coming out. Hopefully, the idea of the book was to get me out in front of more people. It's done. I wrote it. It's great. And you can sign up for more information on there. You can find me being on this podcast on the website, and any other information you want to know about me, just send me a message. I answer all messages, and I'm open to all questions. So please message me.
Yeah, well, hopefully people will see this as a great resource, because I know that there's a lot of people out there that are type 1 diabetics. Not many have as many problems as you do, but they're still out there. My brother-in-law is one, and he's insulin dependent, so we see him sticking himself with that needle all the time. So, hey, we've got one last question here. Before we do that, we got to read a sponsor here. So the last question sponsor for this episode is Podspout. It's the only tool you'll need to promote your podcast. Go to podspout.com to get your free account. Use code SUCCESS to get 10% off any paid plan. If you go to @west.tankersley and check out the link in my bio, you can see what that looks like. It's a great landing page for your podcast. It has all of the different places to find it. So, Brandon, the show is called Shaping Success, and we ask the same guest, we ask every guest the same question. And that question is what is the shape of your successes that is different for every single person? Could be money, cars, living in a mansion, or just general happiness. What is the shape of your success?
The shape of my success is that I really only care about happiness. And so I do what makes me happy. I discovered the hard way that life isn't all about climbing the ladder, making the money, having items to show my success. Success is shown in different ways, and I am happier now than I've ever been because I take the time to do what I need for myself. That doesn't mean I'm selfish. I make plenty of time for other people, but I do what makes me happy as opposed to what makes other people happy. And that is what made me a success.
Well, that's an awesome answer. Hey, I wanted to say thank you for taking the time to be on the show today. It's great getting to hear your story, and hopefully it helps many people.
I hope so too. And thank you so much for having me on, Wes. I really appreciate it.
Yep. All right, everyone. Well, that is the end of the show. Until next time, I want to challenge you to find the shape of your success.